Nutmeg grows on a tiny group of islands in the far east of Indonesia called the Bandas. There's only about 5 or 6 little islands where this tree grew.
Meet Jan Peterzoon Cohen, accountant, spice trader, and oh yeah, killer.
So I'm Jan Peterson Cohen, and I want to be in complete control of the nutmeg. And so my method is basically a scorched earth policy.
But why would anyone scorch earth over nutmeg? Well, nutmeg is thought to ward off plague, and plague was a feature, not an option, of the 16th century. So people want nutmeg. There's just one problem.
It required ships, it required men, it required sending products to the east so that you could do the trading. All of this required a huge amount of money that no individual could have afforded.
So the Dutch invent a little something called modern capitalism.
They create a private company, the Dutch East India Company.
And it is a stockholder-funded corporation.
And the beauty of this was that it spread the risk.
All sorts of people would buy stocks, so it wasn't just something that the elite bought into.
Well-heeled Dutch citizens could invest in the East India Company. More investors means the risk is shared among more people, which makes that risk easier to take on.
UMDAR. It's genius, absolute genius. Once you begin to develop trade routes, you start to develop trading relationships. You started having stock markets. You have to start setting prices. You have to have a consumer who you've sold to. The beginnings of all of the structures we see in capitalism now.
Our quest for flavor requires a wholly new economic model, one that will fundamentally redefine human relationships. And remember our friend, Jan Peterzoon Cohen?
He will go out to the Banda Islands and he will take one look around and say, this is a pretty inefficient operation. The Dutch East India Company will say, will you go back and make it better?
Cohen's version of better is pretty terrifying. When Banda Islanders begin selling to his British competitors, he gives new meaning to the term cutthroat capitalism.
They were subjected to one of the most severe colonial regimes you can imagine.
He essentially wipes out the entire pie, thousands and thousands of people. And it works. The Dutch do get a monopoly on nutmeg.
The only problem they had was that one of the nutmeg islands was a teeny little slice of land called Rumah, but it was owned by the British. So the Dutch and the British actually went to war over Rumah. And the treaty that ended the war gave Rumah and its nutmeg to the Dutch.
Part of that agreement was that a small island called New Amsterdam was going to be given to the British, and it was renamed New York. Nutmeg made Manhattan.
Still riding on the absolute high of our previous week in the Kai Islands, we sailed west in search of Banda. There's just something about an isolated island that captures my imagination. The Banda Islands are a place of legend, where traditional ships still sail past live volcanoes to a forgotten island that once changed the world. But this place can't truly be appreciated without first flipping open a history book. Here's a 30-second recap of the Banda Islands. Firstly, it's important to understand that back in the 16th century, spices were important and super valuable. But there was one spice that was so rare that European nations sailed the world in search of it. And of course, their voyages led them here, to the Spice Islands, which held the only nutmeg plants in the world. At this time in history, nutmeg was worth much more than its weight in gold, and the Dutch discoverers that found these islands were willing to go to extreme measures to protect their monopoly on nutmeg. They even slaughtered thousands of the island's inhabitants to gain control of these islands. It might seem a little ridiculous to us now, but the British went to war with the Dutch over nutmeg, and even captured one of the 6 islands in the archipelago. Interestingly enough, in 1667, the warring nations agreed to a peace treaty where the British agreed to exchange Rumah Island for a small Dutch island in North America called Manhattan, or more commonly referred to as New York. Reminders of Banda's vibrant history are seen everywhere through these islands, from the 2 forts that sit in the middle of the town. Even pulling up the tender had us tying off to a 16th century cannon the moment we came ashore. But with the history well behind us now, we were here for much different purposes, and after a welcoming ceremony from the village, we were invited to take part in a traditional canoe race. Looking very cool there. We are flying.
You are too strong.
Snapped his paddle in half. So the end result was a very close second place to a boat that had a little bit of a head start, I think.
I think they had a bit of a head start, yeah.